Hello, everyone, and welcome to War of the Stars, a Star Wars podcast. Come to you, as always, from deep within the Outer Rim, far beyond the watchful eyes of the Galactic Empire. Joining me, as always, is
Garrett K. Jones.
And also, even though you can't see him, his smiling face, our resident Imperial Emperor, whatever.
PR agent.
PR, yes.
Yes, I guarantee I'm actually here. Hello. Good to be here, guys. Sorry I missed last week. I'm glad to be back online with you guys.
We are too. We are glad to have you. So, our topic for today, before we get started, I feel I need to do a little, warning. We are going to probably take a lot of people off on both sides of the camp of this. We are going to be talking about the fandom and some issues that have arisen throughout the years. This is not a review of The Acolyte or any other show about its merits, its what's good, what's bad, what we think about it. I think that each one of us probably has our own opinion. And we, in a future day, we may do a review of The Acolyte. And this is in no way to say that you don't have the right to enjoy the show or not enjoy the show. I've said time and time again, I do not like the term objectively bad because, in my opinion, taste itself is subjective. Whether or not you like a show, you like a song, you like anything is subjective to your own personal taste. For example, I'll take Rise of Skywalker because that's a movie was very divisive. For every 50 people that you find that can't stand Rise of Skywalker and can come up with strong, legitimate reasons why they think that movie is bad, you're going to find 50 people who love the movie who can show you strong, legitimate reasons to why they enjoy the movie and why they think it's a good movie. So that being said, where should we start with this with the fandom today?
Well, unfortunately, our fandom has been famous for that objectively bad claim. It's practically a signature move by a Star Wars fan is to say, I didn't like this movie, but it's not enough that they didn't like it. They have to, you're not allowed to like it either. Because if they didn't like it and they're wrong, then that means that they're wrong. And this sort of person is not comfortable being wrong. And so not only do they like it, you're not allowed to like it either. And I've seen them go further into like anybody who likes it isn't a real Star Wars fan. Anybody who made it should be fired. You know, like they drove Kelly Marie Tran off social media. They almost made Ahmad Best kill himself. Arguably, they had something to do with Jake Lloyd's nervous breakdown. Like we're not 100% pleasant people to deal with. And unfortunately, we're dealing with people who are, I feel, a very small minority of the fandom, but they're loud.
Yeah.
And they're everywhere.
I think this thing, they're very, very loud.
And my analogy I often use is, if you don't like eating at McDonald's, don't eat at McDonald's. Yeah. Don't go to McDonald's and sit there all day and call everyone there stupid for enjoying McDonald's. Now, debatably, Star Wars is much better than McDonald's. The analogy falls apart if you look at the nutritional content. But regardless, it goes both ways. We were talking about this before we started recording. It goes both ways in that we have some people who, insist that you must like Star Wars. If you're a fan, you have to like this. Well, I don't think that's true either. But I have been.
No, you're allowed. And let me just say this again. You are allowed to like and dislike whatever you want, and to debate the merits of it. We have no problem with people debating the merits or flaws of movies in a civil way. I mean,
It's just a shame that you have to say that so clearly and explicitly,
from both
because you
sides.
shouldn't have to argue that point.
Yeah, and I've
But
seen it
I
on
have
both sides.
I have literally been threatened with violence because I dared to say The Last Jedi wasn't the worst movie I ever saw. And that is the level of defense I offered for Last Jedi. It wasn't the worst movie I ever saw. And I will not repeat what I was said, but it was sexual in nature, and I was threatened with violence. I don't think the guy could have, borne it out. This is funny. This was on a Facebook group known for loudly proclaiming their freedom of speech. Now, as a veteran, I will say that I'm glad that's why I served, so that 300 pounds of Cinnabon dough in a tap-out hood with a taint beard can threaten me with sexual violence. That's great. God bless America. But, it's, again, it's a small minority. Like, you go to a convention, you see none of that. You go to a Facebook group, you see a lot of it. But it's usually the same. Like, I admin, and I have perhaps a wider view than some. I admin on a 50,000 plus Facebook page. I admin on a 30,000 plus Facebook group. So I've got, and between other groups here and there, I'm looking at daily. I'm looking at about 130,000 pairs of eyes dealing with Star Wars. So I have kind of a bird's eye view, and I find often, you go to a Facebook group, and if there is an argument, it is the same 5 people saying this sucks and everyone should think it sucks because I want everyone to agree with me. And everybody else is like, either shut up or block them already, or, engaging them. But, you go to a convention and people love it.
Yeah.
It's just unfortunate that we, more than any other fandom, have that reputation of, if I don't like it, it's because it is, as you say, John Mark, objectively bad. And I like to think I'm at a point now where I can appreciate, like, for example, Taylor Swift is a good analogy. Taylor Swift is a gifted musician who makes amazingly catchy music and hugely successful, and a genius promoter and a marketer. And I don't like her music at all. But that doesn't mean it's bad. Quite the opposite. Yeah. I'm probably wrong. But I would never begrudge anyone else their appreciation of an art form that is not for me. Right. And we see people who... I've seen people who loudly and condescendingly insist that the only 2 good things about Star Wars are Episode 4 and Episode 5, and they've got long diatribes about everything else sucks. I'm like, have you considered maybe you're not a Star Wars fan?
You've been kind of quiet, Garrett. What are your thoughts on this on this topic?
See, I disagree when I say that there are things that can be considered objectively bad, and I look at, and when I talk about this, I'm talking about this from having been an award-winning newspaper-based film critic, whether it's film on streaming or film in the theater. I've been that for a number of years, and so and as always, I'm gonna look at things from a maybe a subjective lens, but from a storytelling lens.
Okay.
But we're not here to break down any of the issues with the Acolyte or anything like that. We're specifically talking about the fandom of Star Wars. Yeah. And the thing of it is that over the last few years, Disney and Lucasfilm have been more or less antagonizing the fan base. And you see it in the way that more recent shows have been promoted. You see it in the fact that they don't let things stand on their own merit. They can see that ratings are going through the toilet, and maybe because things are getting ratioed and people have a little bit more say, especially like on platforms like YouTube, where you can downvote a video and ratio it into oblivion. And I'm aware that is something that does take place, and I'm sure that there are little dweebles in their mom's basement who love classic Star Wars, but can't stand anything new and are just building bots to go out there, find whatever's being promoted on social media and just downvote it, without regard.
Mm-hmm.
That having been said, there have been elements of the fan base getting antagonized by the people creating this content. Case and this is where I find it being very frustrating, because especially with the Acolyte, when they keep saying that this product is not for people of a certain demographic, they're specifically highlighting people who are white, people who are men, people who are on the older spectrum of the age range. So basically our demographic, 30s, 40s, 50s.
Yeah, I'm all of those things. I love it.
But they're specifically antagonizing that group by saying that whatever's coming out in Star Wars is not for us anymore. And the thing is that when you're putting out an IP like that and you're putting out content, your audience is pretty much anyone who's ever grown up with this content. Star Wars is almost 50
And that
years
is majority old white guys at this point. Yeah.
Right. But for example, one of my favorite YouTubers who's a reviewer of all sorts of stuff, and she started her channel with reviewing the episodes of Book of Boba Fett, is Snarky J Cosplay. And she doesn't qualify as any of those demographics. And she herself has been insulted, threatened. Someone went off on her just because of her reviews of various episodes of Star Wars, whether it's Acolyte, Book of Boba Fett, Obi-Wan Kenobi, even some of the Marvel stuff that's been put out lately. And so it's not, and so what we see is that people who have grown up with this, who are not under high school age, they're being told that if you don't like this, then you're not a real fan, or if you don't like this, this isn't for you. And I don't think, I mean, we're not talking about different genres of music or different musicians or musical acts within that. We're talking about a very specific saga of storytelling that has been the inspiration for countless people for almost 5 decades. And I mean, I know someone from high school who suffered from depression, and you know what got them through the travesty that is high school? Star Wars. And I mean, we're talking about someone who had considered unaliving themselves until they got to sit down and watch Star Wars, and it helped them in some way, shape, or form. I don't know exactly how, but it did. But the point is that I don't agree with the fan base that says the Acolyte should not be part of the canon anymore, or that or other entries should not be part of the canon. But from an objective lens, looking at filmmaking, looking at storytelling, there has been a drop in quality, and at this point, it's come to the point where the content creators themselves are deliberately saying and doing things to antagonize the bulk of the fan base that is, and they're doing it. They're targeting a younger demographic, they're doing it at the expense of the long-standing demographic that has been a part of the fan base. And that's the part that pays their bills.
Yeah.
I can't say as I've seen anything of that nature. I don't disagree with you there, but I've not encountered it. But I would say that I think there's a fine line between saying this isn't for you, in that we are not making it with you in mind, and saying this isn't for you in that we are actively making it for someone else.
Yeah.
You know, like as you said, like I am a 50-year-old straight white male. I'm exactly who they're not making it for, and that's fine because 90% of other media is made for straight white males in this country. And I think the Acolyte is great.
And I can see both points. Like, there are And I get where Garrett's coming from of this idea of I don't want to say poking the bear, so to speak, but things are already so divisive in this country already. And something like Star Wars should be meant to unite us, not divide us over over the same issues that we're being divided by already.
I want to hear about how you feel like the quality has dropped, Garrett. I didn't care for the Resistance cartoon, but that is obviously and agreeably not for me, in that it is not set in a time period in which I'm interested and does not contain characters that interest me. But can you elaborate on how you see the quality has dropped? I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm interested in your opinion.
So let's take a look at the Acolyte, since it's the more recent thing and it's fresh in my mind.
Sure.
From a storytelling perspective.
Okay.
Characters' motivations change on a dime. There's nothing consistent in the character development. Case in point, May, when they're on whatever that planet is, where they finally encounter Smilo Ren, or whatever they want to call him. She has for 3 episodes now. This was the 4th episode where we see them on this planet. For up through the episode 4, she had been hunting all these Jedi who had been involved in what happened on Brandok, wanting to get revenge, wanting to kill them, doing so in a variety of very clever ways. Although I'm still not sure exactly what she did to convince Torben to drink the poison. But
she reminded me of Game of Thrones season 8.
And so she goes from being incredibly dead set on this goal, on this motivation, and then she flips on a dime, tells the guy who's been her handler, who happens to be her master, that she's going to betray the master, and the only reason is because her sister is still alive. But then at the end of the very next episode, she injures her sister and then decides to disguise herself as her sister in the presence of a telepath who can't seem to use his telepathy. On top of that, the showrunners seem to forget what Jedi are capable of doing. Like, as soon as I think it was great that they incorporated cortosis in live action. So as soon as I saw that in play, I'm like, that's cortosis. That's great. That's a good use of Legends canon. But the Jedi that Chimera was fighting, they seem to forget that they had access to the Force once their lightsabers were delivered 30 seconds. And then they start going in hand-to-hand combat mode. Okay, great for hand-to-hand combat mode. I think that's fine, but you have the Force. Use it. So aside from that, I mean, it's one of the other things that was egregious for me is, while exposition is going to happen, a great example of good exposition is when in A New Hope, Obi-Wan is explaining what the Force is and what the Jedi were to Luke, who has grown up his entire life under the boot of the Empire, knowing exactly what propaganda the Empire's been putting out about the Jedi. Okay, that exposition is great because it helps advance things for the audience. It helps advance things for the main character. Terrible use of exposition is when Yord shows up on that ship where Osha is working, and there are countless beings on that ship who can identify her as being on that vessel the entire time that Carrie Ann Moss was killed. They do virtually no investigation, no real detective work. And they explain her backstory to her. She already knows her backstory. They only do that for the sake of the audience, and that comes from writers who do not trust their audience to put the pieces together and let the camera show things instead of just telling them.
Okay, thank you for that, Garrett. I appreciate that. I can see your point.
Yeah, yeah, and that's one thing I love about this show is we can have debates, we can agree to disagree on things, we can, and sometimes people, Garrett, you come into it from a completely different viewpoint, a storyteller's viewpoint. You're going to be more critical when it comes to that, but there are sometimes people are just like, I just like the movie or I just like the show. It's an escape. And both sides, I think, are valid. You can like a show that's bad. You can not like a show that's good. You can do whatever you want to do.
I mean, my favorite Marvel movie is Howard the Duck from the '80s. I don't know what to tell you. I'm no critic, but yeah, I think that's a well thought out response, Karen. I hadn't seen it that way.
Yeah. It's good to get things from, as they say in Star Wars all the time, a different point of view.
I like to see a show telling a story from ostensibly the villain's point of view. Because as I'm fond of saying, nobody's the villain of their own story. And Lost Stars is one of my favorite books in the new canon because of that. It tells the story of two Imperial officers who are rah Imperial. And I was looking forward to the Acolyte for that reason. Like, let me see, how somebody who's on the dark side is actually dealing with it. And I think it does a fine job of that, but I have a pretty low bar to set for that. I think Garrett makes an excellent point as far as the storytelling and truth and character. Oh yeah, I got to rewatch it.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that was, I agree with you on that. Like, I like stories that do flip the script and give you that alternate perspective. Like, growing up, my brother had this kid's book that was called The Story of the Three Little Pigs, or The Real Story of the Three Little Pigs, as told by a wolf. And in that premise, it's the wolf has a cold or has a sinus infection or allergies, and every time he sneezes, he knocks down a house. And the pigs are rude and they're jerks to him.
Yeah,
all he's doing is he's trying to bake a cake for his mom, and he's borrowing and wants to borrow a cup of sugar.
Sugar. Yeah. I have that book. I have that book too. It's a great book. I love it. Yeah.
It's a fun story, but like Kamir, when he's
I love
asked
the fact that
why
each time that he go ahead.
Okay. So every time Kamir, or when Kamir is asked in episode 5 of The Acolyte, he's asked, why are you doing any of this? And his response is he basically, it boils down to he wants a student and he wants to practice his religion the way he wants to do it. And he was already, aside from outing himself to the Jedi, he was already doing that. Now, if he's got a larger goal in play, and I think there is, because of the scar on his back that we see in episode 6, or episode 7, or whatever it is. We get, I think he's wanting to go after Vernestra, and because I think she may have been his original master, and that's great. And he's using May, and he's going to try and use Osha to further that goal. That would be great motivation. But when his answer to Soul is, I just want to practice my religion and be free, he was already doing that. Had he not sent May out to kill Jedi, had he not revealed himself, he still would have been able to do that, and the Jedi would have had no idea what he's doing. And the B team would still have been on Brandok 16 years earlier, mowing the grass.
Yeah.
I took that as being sort of a snide, Sith Darksiders that love telling half-truths. And I think, when he says he wants to practice his religion to be free, that's a pleasant way of describing it. But part of his religion is eradicating the Jedi. So when he says, I just want to practice my religion, like, that sounds to me like he's just being basically facetious for its own sake.
But see, the thing is, the wording he chooses in episode 5 is very, very particular. If you're looking at it he says, "You might call me a Sith," because he's using the dark side. He's got a red blade on his lightsaber. Which, don't get me wrong, I thought it was cool that he was able to pull a Shoto lightsaber out of the pommel of his hilt. That was pretty dope. I thought that was really cool. But the theme for the Knights of Ren or for Kylo Ren was played behind him at one point in that episode. So it's like they're hinting at maybe he's the original Knight of Ren, possibly. Maybe. We're not sure yet. But he doesn't exactly identify him as a Sith. He said, you might think I am a Sith, or you might call me Sith.
I'll have to watch that again because I don't remember him saying the word Sith. I'll have to watch that again.
Yeah, it's there. But I mean, if he is a Sith, then yes, eradication of the Jedi is part of that religion. If he is not, and he's just a dark side user with a red blade, which is, it's a little too iconographic for him to not be Sith, but if he's not, then there goes that goal. That it's just him causing havoc for the sake of havoc as part of a larger scheme that seems
we could fill a whole episode on the debate of what constitutes a Sith. Like anybody in the galaxy can say, I'm a Sith. But some would say unless you are directly descended from the lineage of Bane, then you are not a true Sith. But it's like, in many ways, it's not unlike being a terrorist. You can just say you're a terrorist. You don't have to be friends with Osama bin Laden or whoever. You can just well, I'm a terrorist. Okay, fine, you're a terrorist. There's limited criteria on which that's decided.
Yeah.
But I gotta go back over that because I'm actually I must confess I'm an episode behind on Acolyte. I'm not watching.
Yeah, I kind of am too. This is.
I mean, I'm with Brian. I'm kind of with you there. You mentioned Howard the Duck, which from an 80s perspective was just another creature feature. And had I not known that Howard the Duck was part of Marvel, I would have been like, okay, how is that connected to Marvel? But it is, and I mean, I wasn't a fan of it just because it terrified me as a child. But I was able to sit through the 2003 Daredevil film with Ben Affleck, and while it is almost impossible to watch because of how dark it is filmed, literally visually dark, and because some of it gets really over the top with the wire work and all that, I found something enjoyable in it.
Yeah.
And like I said, while I can recognize that the Acolyte has some good things, those good things are, with regards to the series, in my opinion, are exceptions to the rule at this point. Because, like I said, the motivations don't work well. Some of the choices for the characters don't work well. I mean, the whole investigation at the very beginning when OSHA's transport ship crashes on that ice planet, the Jedi the Jedi have already left, even though she's the person of interest. They left to go back to the temple, trusting a droid ship with a hacker on board to make it in one piece. They go back out to collect the survivors. They go back to the temple to get more information, just to go back out to that same system to go find OSHA. There's a lot of back and forth. It's as expensive as we were told it was in Solo, or at least required. That's a lot of fuel expenditure for it's like going to the grocery store when the grocery store is on the opposite side of town, and that's a 10-mile drive each way.
Yeah.
And you're flying.
That harkens back to the Jedi's history. The Jedi have never been particularly good at investigating anything. We discussed the investigation of Ahsoka's alleged crimes. You people are telepaths and you have access to magical psychometry. You don't need to testify. Why don't somebody pick up her lightsabers and determine whether or not she did it? So yes, same thing.
Yeah.
But to circle back on the fandom per se,
Okay.
I think I wish that our fellow fans, and I call them that, I wish our fellow fans were more comfortable not liking every part of Star Wars. Because you can legitimately think Episode 4 and Episode 5 are the only media worth consuming. Because I've seen it. Return of the Jedi, they don't like it because the Ewoks are too cutesy. The prequels are too much CGI. It's just a cash money grab, and Hayden Christensen can't act. Just like you can go through everything that's been released since Empire Strikes Back and find somebody who hates it. But I think go ahead.
This is something I said a long time ago, is that in my mind, to be a Star Wars fan, there's one criteria. You have to like Star Wars. And it doesn't matter what part of Star Wars. If the only thing of Star Wars you've ever seen is the Clone Wars, if you're a kid and that's the only thing you've seen, but you love the Clone Wars, in my mind, you're a Star Wars fan. If the only thing you care about is the original trilogy, you're a Star Wars fan. If you're a prequel fan and you could really care less about the other stuff, you're a Star Wars fan. If you like the Acolyte, you're a Star Wars fan.
There's a tendency in our fandom, and more than any other, to not only to become an anti-Star Wars fan, if you will, where it's like it's your whole personality. Like, and people for a while there, around the release of Last Jedi, people were nervous to even bring up that they liked Star Wars, because like, I don't want to hear you yell at me about how bad the Last Jedi was.
Well, what's the joke? No one hates Star Wars more than Star Wars fans.
Yeah, and people have rewritten
the
that.
Same thing could be said about Star Trek, though, too. I mean,
everything. Yeah,
I mean, think about how many people hated the Kelvin timeline. Think about how many people have been turned off of New Trek, that as it's been premiering on Paramount Plus, whether it's because Michael Burnham comes off as a Mary Sue, or because of just the storytelling in general. I know like one of my best friends, like he likes, irreverent humor. He cannot get on board with Lower Decks because,
that's just sacrilege right there. Lower Decks is amazing.
Absolutely.
Well, I liked it. I thought it was funny, and I'm not even. I thought it was funny, a little out there, and definitely more Rick and Morty than anything else I'd like in that kind of genre of animation. But like my point is that people get turned off by that because they feel like it takes away from the original intent of the creator, whether it's George Lucas or in the briefcase of Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry. And so which is kind of interesting, because like you look at beloved franchises or beloved series, and you see how things get taken in a direction that was never intended by the original creator. Lord of the Rings is another great example. Tolkien was very specific in the descriptions of the beings in Middle Earth because he based it on Germanic and Norse folklore to some extent. And so some of the things that have been done in Rings of Power are they fly in the face of that. But again, I think, and don't get me wrong, there are people who get toxic in the way that they handle their fandom. But I think what happens is that when you love something so damn much, it upsets you when someone doesn't give it the same care or the same consideration as you would yourself as a fan. And that's not saying people who like The Acolyte aren't fans or anything like that. My beef is more with the creative team, because I mean, like, jumping back on Acolyte, Leslie Headland, while she said that she's a fan of Star Wars, doesn't really strike me as all that much. It looks like she's working through a lot of her own personal issues through the episodes that she's written. But the majority of the writers who have been in the writers' room, the people who have been involved in the cast, with the exception of a handful of people, were not people that grew up watching Star Wars. They're not people who actually enjoyed Star Wars. They got their names tacked on because of who they knew and how they got connected. And they're sitting there working this stuff out, not because they're fans of the series, but because they just want to put in whatever they want to put in and make changes to something that's been beloved for, like I said, almost 50 years. And small changes, I don't have a problem with that. If that's something cool that can help expand the lore, great. And if it's well done, great. If it's well written, great. Well executed, cool. But it's not meant to work out your own personal demons because because the showrunner happened to work for a film producer who just happened to be a sleazeball.
Yeah. Well, I think
for those of you who are upset with me,
this has been
please send your hateful emails to Garrett at whitehouse.gov. That's the fastest way to email me, despite what will probably be popping up in the next couple of minutes.
Yes, exactly. Well, to end this on a lighter note, my daughter drew some very cute little pictures. So if you're on our YouTube channel, you'll be able to see this. But when I came home today, she said she had a surprise for me. So she drew, as you can see here.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, that's cool.
A little Yoda.
Is it Yoda or Grogu?
Grogu. It's Grogu. And she also did see if you can guess what this is.
Oh, that's Kylo Ren's saber stabbing Han Solo.
Oh.
She was trying to do the arrow through the heart thing, but instead she did a lightsaber and she did Kylo Ren's lightsaber.
Uh-oh. I think we just found Brian's new apprentice.
Well, I am going to turn on my camera here. I have it.
No. We've joked about this with my.
This is my daughter's
cool.
Palpatine. This was a Christmas present.
That's cool.
We've joked. I have a friend, and we've joked for quite a while since Lily has been little about that, and that she is not the apprentice. She would not be the apprentice of the Sith. She'd be the master of the Sith, the Sith master. Although it's interesting, when she was little, Vader was definitely her favorite character. As she's gotten older, it is Rex. Since she started watching the Clone Wars, Rex is her favorite character.
That's a good decision.
Rex and Ahsoka.
They're a good pairing.
Yeah.
Captain Avuncular.
Again, we love everyone out there. And it's good to debate and to disagree in a healthy way. I think that's the most important, that we can agree to disagree and do so very passionately. We're fans of something that we are very passionate about, and we have passionate opinions. And that's fine, as long as at the end of the day, we all understand that that Star Wars is something that should be for everyone. Like we say at the end of our show, this is our Star Wars, and I think that sometimes people forget that. So that's all I'll say on that end. That's what I'll end that on for this episode. So, Garrett, why don't you tell the people out there where they can find you at?
Well, As I said before, my email is garrett@whitehouse.gov for any trash talk. No, I'm kidding. You guys can find me on X and Instagram at GKJ_publishing, where I talk about my books, The Archives of Async Ram. There's 5 books in the series currently. Epic fantasy, if you're into that kind of thing. I also promote a show called The Right Way on YouTube. Just search for GKJ Publishing. On The Right Way, we talk book recs, author interviews, and creative writing tips. I'm actually coming to the end of my 6th season. This is going to be the 27th. 27th of July is going to be the season finale, featuring the Righties Awards, which John here is nominated for Best Guest Host. Although we got to get more votes for you, buddy.
Yeah.
Voting is open until Tuesday, 11:59 p.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Yes. What about you, Brian?
I am also known as Darth Corosis on the Sith Library and Archives on Facebook. It's a long and storied collection of Sith culture, art, even some lectures. Come on over and join us there at the Sith Library and Archives.
Awesome. As for us right here, of course, you can get a hold of us by your email. Just email wardofstars1@gmail.com. Our Instagram is @ward__of_the_stars. I believe I got that right. Yes, one. Can't forget the one. @wardofstars1 is also our handle on X. You can check out the YouTube show Star Wars Through the Eyes of a Child. Go to YouTube and just search Star Wars Through the Eyes of a Child. We are, of course, a part of Geek News Now. Go to Geek News Now official on YouTube and Spotify and check out not just this show, but all the shows on Geek News Now. Just to let you know, next week we will, of course, be doing our review of episode 2 as we're going through all of the shows. Because July has 5 little behind the scenes. We record on Monday, and then the show's put on Wednesday. So since there is a 5th Monday this week, we will be doing Q&A, opening up the old mailbag. And so if you have any questions for us, comments, snide remarks, want to tell us how handsome we all are, how we have a face for radio, feel free. We'll be putting all that information up on social media. Of course, you got all our email, Twitter, all that stuff. So shoot us questions. We want to know what you guys want to know, what you guys think of the show. Heck, even if you have some ideas of what you want us to talk about in the future, let us know and we'll talk about it. With that being said, remember, this is not just my Star Wars. This is not just your Star Wars. This is all of our Star Wars. Until next time, may the Force be with you.
Ooh, look, root beer.
I don't even know what to say to that.
Go buy The Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire. It's an amazing book.